Step into the Timeless Tales library, where each story unfolds like a soft whisper, guiding you gently into a realm of restful calm. I'm Theodore, your host, and tonight I'll weave a tranquil tale to quiet your thoughts and lull you towards slumber. The Timeless Tales library thrives thanks to the support of listeners like you. If these stories bring you peace, please subscribe to help us keep crafting these serene escapes. As you cozy up, drop a comment below to share where you're tuning in from tonight, and tell us a destination you'd love a story to transport you to. Perhaps Melbourne, Santorini, the Amazon rainforest, or a starlit desert. Your dreams light the way for our little library's glow. This story is about a peculiar case of mysteriously disappearing lights in Grosvenor Square that brings Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson to investigate in the case of the gentle lanterns. The detective duo discovers the crime isn't malicious at all, but rather a deliberate and caring act by a devoted lamplighter. He temporarily removes the lanterns to protect them from the elements, revealing a gentle mystery that highlights the quiet beauty of ordinary acts of care and devotion. Now close your eyes and take a deep breath, letting the worries of the day unroll and flatten out. You are entering the Golden Scroll Room, a special chamber within the Timeless Tales library. This is a place for the oldest, most precious stories, tales written on scrolls of shimmering gold that glow with the warmth of a setting sun. The air is still, carrying a faint scent of old paper and quiet wisdom. Feel your body settle into the rich, soft fabric of your bed, your own personal alcove in this gilded room. Let the weight of your head, your arms, and your legs release. The golden glow of the scrolls fills the room, a gentle and comforting light that soothes your mind and body. Unroll the first scroll. Let the words drift into your thoughts like dust motes in a sunbeam, leading you toward a deep and peaceful rest. Sherlock Holmes, the case of the gentle lanterns. The fog had descended upon London as though the city itself had chosen to exhale a slow, deliberate breath, curling along the streets in delicate silvery tendrils. It did not strike suddenly, nor with menace, but wrapped the city in a soft, persistent embrace, smoothing the harsh edges of stone and brick, and turning familiar streets into a gentle maze of shadow and light. The cobblestones, usually cold and indifferent beneath one's feet, seemed softened by the mist, their uneven surfaces now cloaked in a velvet haze that absorbed the clatter of distant carriage wheels. Iron fences, their black paint dulled by rain and time, glimmered faintly as droplets collected along the wrought curves, each bead catching the light of the gas lamps and refracting it into tiny golden sparks. The air itself was thick with the scent of damp wool, coal smoke, and the faint, earthy aroma of wet leaves swept from the pavement. This particular fog possessed a quality of profound silence. It was not the oppressive, sound-deadening blanket of a heavy pea souper, but a fine, shimmering gauze that absorbed the sharp angles of sound, transforming the city's constant clamour into a muted orchestral hum. The distant tolling of a church bell reached the ear not as a sharp, insistent chime, but as a deep, resonating chord, quickly fading back into the encompassing hush. For a city as perpetually busy as London, this was a transformation, turning the streets not into a place of concealment for miscreants, but into a momentary haven of meditative quiet. Every footstep seemed cushioned, every carriage wheel turned with a respectful grace, and even the occasional shouted command of a cabman was instantly swallowed and softened by the moist air. Even the street lamps themselves, normally bright and insistent against the night, took on a warmer, almost tender glow, bathing the square in a pearlescent luminescence. The light pooled gently at the base of the posts, mingling with the fog in lazy swirls that seemed almost alive, twisting and turning as if the city exhaled along with them. Shadows softened and stretched, creating a world both familiar and dreamlike, as though London had stepped quietly into a reverie where every footstep was cushioned and every sound was muted. The light filtering through the vaporous curtain created complex, almost liquid patterns, pools of saffron and amber that shifted and flowed with the slightest current of air, making the square feel less like a municipal space and more like a vast, hushed ballroom awaiting a delicate waltz. I, Dr. John Watson, had returned from a minor call to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, the damp chill of the evening still clinging to my coat, my thoughts wandering toward the comforting familiarity of Baker Street. There is a particular solace in returning to 221B. The subtle creak of the narrow stair as one ascends, the faint smoky perfume of lamp oil and tobacco drifting through the hallway, the welcoming warmth of the hearth that greets the body even before the fire has fully taken hold. Each detail, no matter how small, speaks of home, of a quiet refuge against the endless rhythm of the city outside. After the sharp, often brutal exigencies of hospital work, the quiet disarray of our shared sitting room was a profound comfort. It was a space where chaos was disciplined by a superior intellect, and where the most alarming truths of the outside world could be dissected, understood, and therefore mastered. Holmes, true to his nature, was already ensconced near the hearth, his violin resting lightly against one knee, papers and notes scattered across the table in a deliberate chaos that somehow mirrored the workings of his own brilliant mind. He was deep in a state of self-imposed rapt concentration, his long, lean figure silhouetted against the firelight. A half-smoked pipe lay, cooling on the mantelpiece, its faint, sweet aroma of Turkish tobacco mingling with the earthy scent of the coal fire. The firelight flickered across the room, dancing upon his sharp features, illuminating the keen glint in his eyes as he looked up to meet mine. That faint, almost imperceptible smile that tugged at the corner of his lips carried both amusement and anticipation, a signal that a new puzzle, unusual and delicate, had presented itself. "Ah, Watson," he said softly, the tone of his voice measured and warm, devoid of any sudden energy but imbued with a quiet pleasure. "Perfect timing. Sit, if you will. We have a visitor tonight whose troubles may delight your curiosity and mine in a manner most unusual." I removed my coat and hung it carefully, the fabric still damp against my fingers, and sank into my chair with a mixture of curiosity and that quiet expectation that always preceded one of Holmes's more subtle cases. I settled into the familiar leather, feeling the satisfying give of the cushion beneath me. "I trust this is not a case of petty theft or mislaid letters?" I asked, allowing a wry smile to soften the question. The thought of a complex cipher or a baffling trail of physical clues was, I admit, always more appealing than the tedious unravelling of a domestic squabble. Holmes shook his head, the gesture precise and thoughtful. He picked up his violin and drew the bow across the strings in a long, soft note that seemed to sigh and then settle. No, Watson, this is not ordinary mischief. This is a matter of subtlety, of quiet observation, of the hidden rhythms of human care. A mystery, yes, but one of gentleness rather than alarm, where the most telling clues are found not in force or haste, but in patience and attention. I find I have a particular relish for this species of enigma, where the motive is not avarice or malice, but something far more delicate, perhaps even artistic. Before I could ask further, a soft knock at the door announced the arrival of our visitor. Mrs. Hudson appeared immediately, moving with her accustomed quiet efficiency, and guided a diminutive woman into the room. The woman was wrapped in a thick dark green shawl, its intricate wool pattern suggesting both warmth and a modest income. Her expression carried the delicate weight of anxiety mingled with hope, as though the night itself had conspired to leave her in uncertainty until she could find guidance. Her eyes, though tired, were clear and direct. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice soft yet resolute, holding a fragile composure. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I do not know whom else to turn to." Holmes inclined his head with that gentle courtesy he extended to all who sought his counsel, a courtesy often reserved for the most humble of clients. "Not at all, madam. Pray sit by the fire. The warmth will ease you. Might I inquire your name?" "Eleanor Whitcomb," she replied, smoothing her shawl. "I live in Grosvenor Square, on the northern side of the square. I am at a loss, Mr. Holmes. The events that have transpired these past nights are most unusual. It is the uncertainty, you see, that is the most difficult thing to bear." Holmes gestured toward a chair by the fire, ensuring she was positioned to feel the maximum warmth. "We shall hear you. Please, tell us what has occurred." Mrs. Whitcomb's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them over the folds of her shawl, the fabric warm against her palms, yet offering little comfort to the unease in her voice. "It concerns the lanterns," she began, her words deliberate, each syllable carrying the faint weight of sleepless nights spent in anxious observation. "For 3 nights, precisely at 10 o'clock, the lamps along Grosvenor Square vanish. The light simply disappears. There is no sign of tampering, no disturbance, no evidence of any ordinary cause, and yet the square is plunged into a sudden, profound darkness. One moment the lamps glow as they always do, bathing the square in their golden warmth, and the next, the world is muted, hushed, and strangely expectant. It is as if someone has pulled a velvet curtain across the entire world outside my window. When morning comes, the lamps are restored as though nothing has occurred. But the stillness, it is unnerving. The square seems to hold its breath, as if aware of a secret, too delicate to reveal, and we are left only with the echo of absence. Holmes's eyes glimmered faintly, reflecting the soft lamplight of our sitting room, a spark of intrigue hidden beneath his usual composure. He tapped his fingers lightly together. 3 nights, same hour, no apparent interference. Remarkable, he murmured, his tone low, almost reverent, as though the mystery itself deserved quiet contemplation. The regularity suggests a schedule, a deliberate routine, and this has caused alarm among the residents. Yes, she admitted, a faint sigh escaping her lips. Though it is not frightening in any ordinary sense, it unsettles everyone who lives there. The quiet. It is unnatural, almost deliberate, though not dangerous. The local constable dismissed it as a simple fault in the gas lines. But a fault is not so precise in its timing, is it? Yet anxiety persists, and I cannot fathom what might be responsible. I have found myself standing at the window, counting the seconds, waiting for the light to simply be extinguished, and the waiting is a kind of gentle torment. It is as if the square itself conspires in silence, leaving us uneasy, watching shadows that have no substance. Holmes rose and began pacing the room, each step measured and deliberate, his mind clearly turning over possibilities with an almost tactile curiosity. His hands occasionally lifted to his chin, fingers brushing against the keen angles of his face, as though he were shaping his thoughts into form. He paused before the fireplace, staring into the heart of the flames. "Then we shall observe, madam," he said, his voice calm but imbued with energy. "This is no ordinary mischief. The disappearance is deliberate, precise, and guided by a careful hand. There is intention here, an order hidden beneath the quiet. We must watch, listen, and wait, for subtlety reveals itself only to those with patience, and it is in patience that the truth quietly resides. The problem, you see, is not what is taken, but the manner of the taking." I watched him closely, ever fascinated by his energy, his extraordinary focus, and the way even the gentlest of mysteries seemed to animate him fully. Even when the case promises no danger, Holmes moves as though orchestrating a delicate ballet, attuned to every nuance of the environment, every whisper of the room, and every shift in human expression. There is a rhythm to his observation, a careful choreography that seems invisible to ordinary eyes, yet carries within it the certainty that no secret, however subtle, can remain hidden for long. He was already inhabiting the mind of the one who removed the light, attempting to grasp the motive that could justify such a precise and yet entirely non-malicious routine. By 9:30 we had arrived at Grosvenor Square. The familiar grandeur of the area softened and transformed by the thickening fog. The mist curled around the lampposts like tendrils of delicate smoke, winding around their iron stems and pooling at their bases in slow, lazy spirals. It turned every edge of the square into a soft silhouette, every building a gentle shadow of itself, so that even the familiar corners seemed touched by quiet enchantment. The city's usual chorus, the distant clatter of carriage wheels, the occasional murmur of pedestrians, was hushed to almost nothing, replaced by the soft whisper of fog moving across the cobblestones and the occasional muted creak of iron gates. A cart rumbled somewhere far away, muffled by the silver haze, its sound as distant and dreamlike as a lullaby. The air felt heavy, yet entirely clean, carrying the promise of a sharp drop in temperature later in the night. Mrs. Whitcomb accompanied us, her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders. She moved with small, hesitant steps, as though the fog itself demanded caution. "I feel as though the night itself is holding its breath," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the gentle stir of mist around our feet. Her words seemed to hang in the damp air, a reflection of the strange hush that had settled over the square. We positioned ourselves subtly in the deep shadow of an archway, allowing us a clear yet inconspicuous view of the nearest lamppost. Holmes knelt beside one of the lampposts, fingers brushing lightly along the ironwork, tracing the delicate curves as if reading a manuscript written in brass. His gaze swept over the fittings in the stone base, noting every scratch, every tiny polished edge. "Observe, Watson," he whispered, his voice so quiet that even the fog seemed to lean closer. "The polish, the subtle wear, each lamp bears the mark of careful handling. Note the lack of rough scraping or hasty scratches near the latches. Our nocturnal artisan is no ordinary thief. This is a guardian, a quiet custodian, one who moves with diligence and reverence rather than haste or malice. The absence of damage is the most compelling clue to a benign intent." I squinted through the thickening mist, the golden pools of lamplight wavering faintly in the haze. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, the silence of the square magnifying the internal rhythm of my pocket watch. At precisely 10 o'clock, the largest lamp began to dim, its warm glow softening into a tender amber, and then, almost imperceptibly, it vanished entirely. The effect was immediate and profound. The localized area of the square was instantly plunged into a rich, velvety blackness. In the space where it had stood, a faint flicker appeared, dancing lightly across the fog, as though a hidden candle glided silently past the lampposts, leaving no shadow of its own. It was a single, small point of light, moving with an almost floating grace. I watched, utterly mesmerized. I could now just discern a figure moving, incredibly swiftly and with unnerving silence, at the base of the lamppost. A gentle, almost inaudible metallic click reached our ears, and then the figure with the faint light moved to the next lamp. The movement was so subtle, so elegant, that it seemed almost a trick of the fog itself. It was the opposite of a crime. It was an act of precision maintenance, executed with a phantom-like speed to minimize the interruption of the square's nightly illumination. Moments later, as if the square had drawn in its breath and let it out again, the lamps returned to their gentle golden illumination, steady and reassuring. The brief darkness was over. Mrs. Whitcomb exhaled, a sound mingling relief and wonder. "It is back, as if nothing had occurred," she said softly, her fingers tightening around her shawl as though holding onto the reassurance of light itself. Holmes straightened slowly, his eyes gleaming with that quiet, penetrating spark of discovery, that always seemed to brighten the dimmest evening. "The lights are never harmed," he said, voice calm yet alive with subtle triumph. "The method is deliberate, precise, and guided by a careful hand. The brief hiatus in the light is a necessity, not a choice motivated by mischief. There is a small window of time required to perform a delicate operation on the lamps themselves, perhaps to guard them against the very dampness of this fog. The timing is so exact because our operative is seeking to maintain a schedule and minimize disturbance. Our next step is morning observation. There, Watson, we shall glimpse the hand that labors with such diligence, and perhaps understand the delicate poetry hidden within this quiet nightly mystery." The next morning, Grosvenor Square awoke slowly, as though reluctant to leave the quiet embrace of night. The lingering fog hung in soft silvery veils, filtering the morning light into a gentle, almost ethereal glow that bathed the square in muted radiance. Birds chirped intermittently, their notes crisp and sweet, punctuating the hush with delicate music that floated over the cobblestones and mingled with the faint murmur of the waking city. The lamps, their brass polish to a warm gleam, caught the pale light, casting subtle shifting shadows that played across the stones like a quiet choreography, revealing the square's familiar features in entirely new, intimate patterns. Holmes moved with his characteristic precision, crouching beside the lampposts as though he were studying living organisms. His fingers traced the ironwork and brass fittings, pausing to examine hinges, latches, and tiny indentations pressed into the stone, each mark a small testament to unseen care. He pointed to a barely visible scrape on the stone base of the post. "Notice, Watson," he murmured, his voice low and measured. "This subtle depression, not a gouge, but a worn groove. It is caused by repeated careful handling, by a hand trained to be gentle yet exact. A specific tool, perhaps a narrow, soft wedge, has been inserted here countless times. Such marks reveal patience, discipline, and attention to detail. A person of no ordinary temper performs this task. The routine itself is a matter of profound ritual for them." I followed his gaze to a narrow alleyway between two adjoining townhouses, a utilitarian gap often ignored by the residents. There, small, nearly imperceptible footprints trailed across the damp gravel, each print shallow and delicate, suggesting a lightness of step and a deliberate effort to leave no disturbance behind. The prints were smaller than a working man's heavy boot, and the pattern suggested a soft, rubber-soled shoe. "A careful, considerate guardian," I murmured, my eyes tracing the subtle evidence. "Yes," Holmes replied softly, still crouched, absorbed in the study of the lamps. "And observe the alignment, note the rotation of each shade, the evenness with which light is directed across the square. There is method here. It is art preserved in routine, not crime. The square is tended, not violated. The direction of the faint drag marks on the iron also suggests the removal of a delicate sealed housing, which is then swiftly replaced. Our lamplighter removes the delicate mechanism to protect it from the condensation caused by the evening fog. Our path led us toward a small shed, discreetly tucked behind the southern row of houses, its timbers darkened by age and weather. Holmes approached with gentle authority, tapping lightly upon the door with the tip of his walking stick. Moments later, a man appeared, his hands still damp from work, his face framed by a soft grey beard. His eyes were kind and steady, with the patient, reflective look of a man who spends his days in quiet observation. He seemed entirely unsurprised by our presence, as though he had anticipated our arrival. "Mr. Holmes," the man said quietly, his voice calm and measured, a gentle rumble. "I suspected you might visit. The light in Grosvenor Square rarely fails to attract the observant eye." Holmes inclined his head in greeting. "You are the caretaker of these lamps, I presume? The architect of their gentle, temporary vanishing?" "I am Thomas Fenwick," the man replied, his tone patient and deliberate. "Each lamp requires care, cleaning, polishing, sometimes temporary removal to protect against damp and wear. The mechanism that generates the light, if left in the heavy, moist air for too long, can corrode. Extinguishing them briefly allows me to remove the inner housing, check the mantle and regulator, polish the glass while it's dry, and reseal it against the night air. It is purely precautionary, not meant to alarm anyone. It is an act of preservation against the elements that would otherwise shorten their useful life." I blinked, momentarily taken aback by the sheer simplicity and meticulousness of the explanation. "So the vanishing light is intentional?" "Yes," Fenwick said, nodding with gentle assurance. "I care for the lamps, not to frighten, but to preserve them. Each night, for precisely the time it takes to attend to the workings, the light is removed temporarily, then restored with careful attention. It takes me 1 minute and 42 seconds per lamp, a schedule I have maintained for 15 years. Holmes's eyes gleamed, the faint spark of admiration flickering in their depths. "A conscientious thief of light," he said softly, almost reverently. "Extraordinary. Rarely does one encounter such devotion to subtle beauty, executed with patience and grace. You understand the vulnerability of these small flames in a great indifferent city." Holmes led us gently inside Fenwick's shed, a small, quiet space tucked away behind the southern row of houses, where the faint scent of lamp oil and polished brass mingled with the earthy aroma of aged wood. Sunlight softened by lingering morning fog filtered through the narrow windows, illuminating the interior with a gentle silvery glow that kissed each surface. Lantern components, delicate brass regulators and spare glass shades gleamed softly on shelves and hooks, their bases catching the light in tiny warm reflections, while glass shades shimmered as if holding the memory of every evening's glow. The workbench was a study in careful order. Polishing cloths lay folded with deliberate neatness, arranged by grade of softness. Brushes of varying size, each dedicated to a specific part of the mechanism, were aligned with military precision. Small, hand-carved wooden wedges, the very tools Holmes had deduced from the marks on the lampposts, rested like silent sentinels and jars of specialized lamp oil glimmered in a row, their contents catching stray beams of light. Every tool seemed to belong exactly where it was placed, as if the shed itself had absorbed Fenwick's fastidious nature over years of patient labour. Fenwick moved with quiet deliberation, lifting a lamp component as one might handle a rare and fragile artifact. He examined the brass base with practiced eyes, running a thumb over its curves, then polished the glass with careful circular motions. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and unhurried, as though time itself had slowed to match the rhythm of his work. "The glass, Mr. Holmes," he explained, his voice a soft murmur, "must be polished when dry. The fog leaves a fine, almost invisible film of moisture that, if dried under the heat of the lamp, leaves a microscopic haze that dulls the light. I remove them, allow them to rest and dry in the still, warm air of this shed, and polish them before the morning returns them to the city." When he replaced the lamp on its hook, it was as though he had never touched it at all. No fingerprints, no marks, only the lamp restored to a pristine perfection that was invisible to the casual eye. Holmes watched with rapt attention, his gaze flicking from hinge to shade, brass to glass. "Notice, Watson," he whispered, his voice low and reverent, "the alignment of the hinges, the rotation of each shade, the polish on the brass. Every detail is attended to. The mystery of the vanishing lamps is resolved not by interference, but by protection. The guardian leaves no trace behind, save for the temporary absence of light. Every movement is a deliberate act of care. He is an artist whose medium is light itself." Fenwick continued his work with an almost meditative rhythm, his hands moving gently yet assuredly over each lamp. There was a quiet poetry in the repetition, a calm devotion that seemed to flow from him into the very objects he tended. "Night and day," he murmured softly, almost to himself, "the square's beauty must be preserved. The light is a trust, not a fixture. It must be honoured with diligence." His voice carried the weight of sincerity, a quiet vow to the lamps themselves, as if speaking to the brass and glass might grant them longevity and the grace of undisturbed light. Even I, watching silently, felt a gentle warmth in the room, a sense that care, patience, and devotion could transform the ordinary into something quietly extraordinary. There was no rush, no tension, only the soft cadence of deliberate labour, each action a reassurance that the square outside would awaken each night to light, restored with tenderness and thoughtfulness. Holmes, too, seemed to breathe in the rhythm of Fenwick's work, his sharp mind absorbing the subtlety of every touch, every careful rotation, every gleam of polished brass, as if learning to read the language of quiet guardianship itself. The greatest mysteries, I realized, are not always those with the most sensational crimes, but those that reveal a hidden, profound human devotion. That night, the fog returned to London as though carrying with it a soft exhalation of the city itself. It curled lazily along streets and alleys in silvery coils, drifting over cobblestones and rooftops, softening the edges of buildings and muffling distant sounds into a gentle, soothing hush. Grosvenor Square glowed under steady lamplight, the golden pool spilling over the mist, illuminating shadows that swayed lazily with each subtle whisper of the evening breeze. The lamp's light seemed to breathe, alive yet calm, transforming the square into a quiet sanctuary suspended between night and day. Inside 221B, Holmes played softly on his violin, the notes delicate and warm, threading through the quiet room and mingling with the gentle crackle of the hearth. He played a sombre, reflective piece, a slow air of his own composition, which seemed to capture the measured rhythm of Fenwick's life. The melody carried a hint of wonder and reflection, echoing the measured rhythm of the fog outside, wrapping the room in a cocoon of calm. Each note seemed to linger, brushing softly against the mind, encouraging it to settle and release the tensions of the waking day. It was a musical tribute to the unsung hero of Grosvenor Square. "Watson," he said at last, lowering the instrument and leaning back slightly, the glow of the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "There is a peculiar satisfaction in a mystery resolved without danger. Fenwick's care, the brief disappearance of light, the gentle restoration, these acts are quiet poetry. They exist not to alarm but to preserve, to nurture a fragile beauty hidden in plain sight. He has turned a tedious job into a profound nightly ritual, and in doing so, he has elevated his station far above the petty thieves and murderers that usually occupy our attention." I nodded slowly, eyes drawn to the mist-laden square beyond the window pane. The street lamps glimmered faintly through the haze, steady and reassuring. "And perhaps," I murmured, "the city sleeps more peacefully because of such quiet vigilance, unaware yet enriched by it. Mrs. Whitcomb, for all her anxiety, was right to be unsettled, not by malice, but by the unfamiliarity of such total, perfect diligence." Holmes allowed a faint contemplative smile to touch his lips. "Indeed, Watson, not all mysteries demand revelation of wrongdoing. Some exist to teach us subtle lessons, to notice beauty in patience, to perceive care hidden in ordinary acts, and to cherish the gentle rhythms that often go unnoticed. Fenwick's work is a testament to the profound significance of the small, consistent gesture. There is wisdom in observing the quiet diligence of others." He then reached over and picked up the paper that had originally brought the complaint, a brief, hysterical letter from a nervous resident. He held it to the flame for a moment, then let it drop into the fire, where it instantly curled and vanished. "Our file on the gentle lanterns is closed," he stated simply. The fog drifted thicker now, curling and pooling like a soft blanket around the square, embracing every corner in tender obscurity. Shadows swayed gently, and the lamps glimmered as though breathing in time with the night, steady and luminous, a reminder of care and constancy. The square, unaware of its gentle guardian, was bathed in a light that was honest, pure, and meticulously protected. As I sank deeper into my chair, watching the soft interplay of light and mist, a profound sense of calm settled upon me. The ordinary world seemed distant, suspended beyond the veil of fog and quiet, leaving only the warmth of the hearth, the lingering resonance of Holmes' violin, and the gentle glow of Grosvenor Square. When I finally drifted to sleep in 221B, I carried with me a deep, comforting serenity, the knowledge that some mysteries exist not to alarm, but to preserve serenity, illuminate the quiet wonders of life, and nurture the soft delight that comes from observing beauty patiently and tenderly. The case of the gentle lanterns, in its quiet resolution, became a profound meditation on the unsung heroes of London, the diligent souls whose constant unseen efforts allow the great machinery of the city to function not just efficiently, but with a surprising and enduring grace.